What is going on, guys? Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we're going to be chatting about how to start. You're likely looking to make some healthful changes for the new year, so how should you go about doing that? Should you make big changes all at once, or should you make smaller shifts and let those changes accumulate over the course of time? I'm going to be outlining which approach to take for you as an individual, given your tendencies and your psychological makeup. It's really important to know that neither approach is better than the other. However, one or the other is going to be better for you as a person. The first and foremost question to ask yourself is, who are you? Are you more of a moderator or more of an abstainer? Meaning, can you have a square or two of chocolate, feel satisfied and put it back in the cupboard and not even think about it again? Or if you decide to open that chocolate bar, is the whole thing going down the hatch? The moderator has a moderation-like approach. The abstainer has more of an all or nothing approach. So the moderator indulges in smaller quantities more frequently, and the abstainer indulges in larger quantities far less frequently. Now, it turns out that 90 to 95% of dietitians and nutritionists are in fact moderators. So they can have a single scoop of ice cream and call it quits, or they can enjoy a handful of chips and simply stop there. We tend to idealize this type of person. We tend to think that moderation is somehow the goal where we should be or where we ultimately should get to. But the way we evolved is in direct conflict with a moderation mindset. We evolved in a food scarce environment, meaning starvation was a legitimate threat. So, for example, when we came across an orange tree back in the day, we needed to be able to eat as many oranges as possible in a sitting because we didn't know where our next meal was coming from. Also, it was a highly competitive environment, meaning if we were like, oh no, I'm just gonna have 2 mandarins because I'm watching my figure and I'll have a couple more tomorrow. You don't have that option because if you don't gorge on the mandarins, some other animal will. And the mandarins aren't going to be there tomorrow. So you either get them now or you don't get them at all. We still have this evolutionary wiring. However, we're not in a food scarce environment anymore. We are in a food abundant environment. But we've got that same pull to get it while it's hot. And therefore, you could argue that being a moderator is actually very rare due to how we evolved. And it's true. There are far fewer moderators out there than there are abstainers. You can just look at how our health has declined as we become more quote unquote advanced or westernized as a society. We move less than ever and we eat more than ever, and it shows in the average person's health of the worldwide population. Now, I do this whole nutrition thing for a living, and I am in fact an abstainer. I don't fall into the moderator category like 90 to 95% of dietitians and nutritionists do. It actually kind of makes you think, did the nutrition field choose the dietitian, or did the dietitian choose the nutrition field? Because if you're naturally quote unquote good at something, you tend to gravitate towards it. So folks who are moderators tend to gravitate towards the nutrition field if they have an interest in it, because for whatever reason, they find it easy to moderate their calorie intake, whereas most folks don't. But let's dig into the pros and the cons of both the moderator approach and the abstainer approach, because there are two sides to every coin. So first up, let's identify the pros of having an abstainer or all or nothing like tendency. Abstainers can make big changes very quickly because once they decide that they're going to do something, they do it, they commit, they almost obsess, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because abstainers are typically the best in the world at their craft. If you look at elite athletes, folks who are very successful in business, or really anything for that matter, they're typically abstainers because it takes an obsessive-like mentality to get that good at something. So the key advantage to being an abstainer is you can make big shifts in your life extremely quickly, which translates to big fitness gains fast. However, there are also cons to the abstainer paradigm, and the main downfall of these folks is a perfectionist-like mentality, meaning they're either on or they're off. If things don't go perfectly to plan, they tend to spiral off track very quickly, so they tend to get on track quickly, but they also fall off track quickly, and when the wheels fall off, they typically really fall off. Abstainers tend to have that fuck it mentality. One slip up leads to 10 because I had one cookie, so I might as well have the whole box. What's the difference? It's sort of like getting a flat tire and being like, well, I might as well slash the other three because I've got one flat already. It sounds ridiculous when you put it in the context of a flat tire, but it's the perfectionist nature or rigidness of the approach, the abstainer approach, that leads to this type of setup. So to sum up the abstainer paradigm, they can make big changes in both directions very fast. It's a double-edged sword. But if they set themselves up for success, which we'll talk about, they can make amazing progress and sustain it. Now on to the moderator. The advantages of having more of a moderation paradigm is that these folks tend to be more flexible and feel perfectly okay making smaller changes over a longer time frame. So basically they tend to be more patient, whereas the abstainers are less so. The great thing about the moderator is that they just slowly truck along day by day, making little shifts, and those little shifts turn into big ones when you compound them over the course of time. They're typically not the best in the world at things because they spread their efforts over more areas, meaning they're more so a jack of all trades type. There are also cons to the moderator approach. They get much slower results because they don't put as much effort in on the front end. They let their efforts compound more slowly over the course of time, and therefore it takes longer to achieve their desired result. But you could also easily argue that the moderator is sort of like the tortoise in the Tortoise and the Hare classic. So to sum up the moderator, they make smaller changes over the course of a larger time frame and therefore get slower results, but those results tend to stick because they get on track a little more slowly, but they also fall off track in a much slower manner. Now that we've laid out some of the pros and cons to both approaches, let's dig into how to start given your individual tendency. Step number one is to be honest with yourself. Don't pretend you're a moderator if you're not just because you wish that you were. I wish I was 6'6" so I could play in the NBA, but I'm 5'10", so, fuck. It is what it is. Now, this isn't to say that your tendency can't shift and change over the course of time, because it can. I've actually become more moderate since starting my fitness journey. However, this shifts very, very slowly. And also, even if it didn't, it wouldn't matter. It's all good. Acknowledge where you're at and work with your tendency versus comparing yourself to some random ideal. So, the nutrition approach for the abstainer. First and foremost, clean house. Get rid of all the tempting calorie-dense foods in your home because it's not a matter of if you're going to eat them, it's when. You know that if you've got, say, chocolate around and you have a moment of weakness and you go for a square, you're probably going to have the whole bar. So make it easy on yourself and just don't have it around. Why not just take the willpower and discipline out of the equation altogether? Secondly, do a nutritional overhaul. Abstainers thrive by making big changes. They have no problem going cold turkey, so start eating single and minimal ingredient whole foods every day that you make yourself at home. This way, you're going to see fast results, which is exactly what you thrive on. Big changes across the board. You might want to implement a treat meal, say once per week. However, use your best judgment because it could snowball. If you do decide to implement a treat meal, be sure to have it at dinner or at night because you don't want to have it early in the day and then have your treat meal turn into a treat day. Nutrition for the moderator. I'd actually still recommend cleaning house because while the moderator can moderate, if you have tons of treats around, you might just indulge too much over the course of any given day or week. So the moderator might not need to get rid of all the treats, but don't have 1,000 different types of tasty treats on hand because that'll likely make it even tough for the moderator. Secondly, make some small changes. For example, you could implement a rule that you have a palm-sized portion of lean protein every time you eat, or you could add a cup or two of vegetables to each meal, or just change one meal per day. You could commit to a high-protein breakfast, for instance. Once the moderator feels like that shift is in place and it's second nature, implement another change and do that until it's habitual. On to movement. So movement for the abstainer. Get 10K steps in per day. Maybe give yourself one day, say Sunday, to have a quote-unquote lazy Sunday, but otherwise, get it done because this will make you feel good and walking is awesome for fat loss. If you want to work out, go for it. Just don't go from 0 workouts per week to 5. Start with 2, stick with it for a month or two, and then move to 3 workouts per week and so on. The reason I don't recommend going straight to 5 workouts is that even though the abstainer thrives on a big change setup, you will injure yourself if you go from 0 to hero with workouts, so you need to scale up appropriately regardless. Movement for the moderator. You could start with a 30-minute walk 3 times per week, and once you've dialed that in, you could bump it up to 4 and then 5 and then so on. Workout wise, it's actually the same as the abstainer because injuries will pop up if you scale up too quickly. So start with a couple workouts per week, even from home if you find it difficult to get to the gym, or if you just don't like gyms. Something is better than nothing, and moderators like small changes. Sleep for the abstainer. Set a rigid bedtime and stick to it. Get your 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night and maybe give yourself a Friday or Saturday night to have a later bedtime. However, don't let that spill over into back-to-back nights because it's likely that this snowballs into 3 nights and 4 nights, and all of a sudden you're dealing with some major sleep debt. Sleep for the moderator. You can just go to bed 15 minutes earlier each night for a week or 2 and then bump it up by another 15 minutes and so on until you reach the sleep that you need to wake up without an alarm, feeling rested and alert all day. No matter your tendency, if sleep is a priority for you, I'd recommend setting a bedtime alarm just like you'd set a morning alarm. This way your bedtime alarm goes off, you get your sleep routine rolling, and it'll support your sleep prioritization. So as you look at making these helpful changes, first and foremost, be honest with yourself about your tendency and which setup gives you a better opportunity to succeed. There is no right or wrong or good or bad when it comes to how you approach your fitness goals. There's just a more effective way and a less effective way given your psychological makeup. That's it. Take the judgment, ideals, shoulds and shouldn'ts off the table and make this year different. There's no reason why it can't be. Every body has the opportunity to change. And I've talked about this a ton on the podcast, but consistency is the through line, no matter whether you're a moderator or an abstainer. Consistency has got to be there, or you're just going to be spinning your wheels, feeling stuck, and having no results to show for it. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Also follow me up on Instagram at n1fitness and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. Lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.